The needle slipped through the worn fabric with practiced ease, Clara Jensen's calloused fingers guiding the thread, as autumn sunlight streamed through the window of her small boarding house room in Park City, Utah Territory, though most folks just called it the dirt and dust capital of nowhere in this year of 1877. She had found the bundle of clothes outside her door that morning, accompanied by a hastily scrawled note from Mrs. Patterson downstairs, asking if she might mend them for a stranger staying at the boarding house, a man too proud to ask for help himself, but clearly in need of it. The shirt she held now was torn clean across the back, as if its owner had been dragged through barbed wire or worse, and she wondered what kind of life would put such wear on a man's belongings. The boarding house creaked and settled around her as Clara worked, her small room on the second floor offering a view of Main Street where miners and cowboys alike wandered past saloons and general stores. She had been in Park City for 3 months now, having fled a difficult situation in Missouri, where her father had tried to marry her off to a man twice her age with hands that were too familiar and breath that reeked of whiskey. At 22, Clara had decided her fate was her own to determine, even if that meant scrubbing floors and mending clothes to survive in this rough mountain town, where silver mines drew men seeking fortune, and often finding only back-breaking labor and disappointment. The shirt in her hands was well made despite its condition, the kind of garment that spoke of better days or at least careful selection. She ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling the weight of it, imagining the man who wore it. Mrs. Patterson had mentioned he was a cowboy, though what a cowboy was doing this far north in mining country was anybody's guess. Most of the men here were either digging in the earth or serving those who did, but cowboys were a different breed entirely, tied to the open range and cattle drives that seemed impossibly far from these mountain valleys. Clara had just finished the shirt and was examining a pair of trousers with a torn knee when heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway outside her door. She set aside her work and listened as the footsteps paused, then continued past her room toward the stairs. Curiosity got the better of her, and she rose to peek through the gap in her door, catching sight of a tall figure in a dark coat descending the staircase. Something about the way he moved, careful and deliberate as if every motion cost him, made her wonder if this was the owner of the clothes she had been mending. She returned to her work, determined to finish before supper. The trousers required more attention than the shirt had, with multiple tears suggesting their owner had lived a hard life recently. As she worked, Clara found herself constructing stories about the stranger, imagining what circumstances had led him to Park City and what had damaged his clothes so thoroughly. Perhaps he had been in a fight, or maybe he had simply been unlucky enough to encounter the wrong end of a steer's temper. Cowboys dealt with such things, or so she had heard from the few ranch hands who occasionally passed through town. The afternoon wore on, and Clara completed her repairs just as the dinner bell rang downstairs. Mrs. Patterson ran a decent establishment and provided one hot meal a day for her boarders, which was more than many places offered. Clara folded the mended clothes carefully and carried them downstairs, hoping to find Mrs. Patterson and return them before settling in for supper. The dining room was already filling with the usual collection of miners and drifters when Clara entered. Mrs. Patterson stood near the kitchen doorway, directing her daughter Sarah in setting out the evening meal. Clara approached with the folded clothes, and Mrs. Patterson's weathered face broke into a smile. "Oh, Clara dear, you finished already. You are a wonder with that needle. Let me take those to Mr. Wakefield right away. He has been asking about them." Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Patterson had taken the clothes and was already moving toward a table in the corner where a man sat alone, his back to the room. Clara watched as the landlady approached him, saw his shoulders straighten as she spoke, saw him turn slightly to accept the bundle. In that moment, Clara caught a glimpse of his profile, sharp and weathered like the mountains surrounding the town, a face that looked like it had seen too much sun and not enough kindness. She turned away before he could notice her watching, and found a seat at one of the long communal tables where the other boarders were gathering. Sarah Patterson served stew and bread, and the conversation around Clara turned to the usual topics of mining yields and silver prices, complaints about working conditions and speculation about which claims might pay out. Clara ate quietly, her mind still on the mysterious cowboy in the corner and the clothes she had spent the afternoon repairing. "That fellow over there came in 2 days ago looking like death warmed over," said a miner named Harold, jerking his thumb toward the corner table. "Heard he got caught in a rock slide up in one of the canyons. Lucky to be alive, they say." "What is a cowboy doing up in the canyons anyway?" another man asked. "Should be down on the range with the cattle." "Maybe he is looking for work like the rest of us," Harold replied. "Times are hard everywhere, not just in the mines." Clara risked another glance toward the corner and found the cowboy examining the clothes she had mended, his hands running over the stitching she had made. Even from across the room, she could see the careful attention he gave to her work, and something about that scrutiny made her inexplicably nervous. She had mended hundreds of garments in her life, first for her family and now for money, but she had never particularly cared what the owners thought of her repairs. This time, though, she found herself hoping her stitches met whatever standards a cowboy might have. The evening meal concluded, and the boarders dispersed to their various pursuits. Some headed to the saloons, others to their rooms, and a few gathered around the pot-bellied stove in the common room to play cards and share stories. Clara helped Sarah clear the tables, a task she had taken on in exchange for a small reduction in her rent, and tried not to notice when the cowboy rose from his corner table and left the room with his bundle of mended clothes. Later, as Clara climbed the stairs to her room, she found a small folded piece of paper that had been slipped under her door. She picked it up and unfolded it, revealing a brief message written in surprisingly neat handwriting. "Thank you for the fine work on my clothes. The repairs are better than the original stitching. I am in your debt. Zachariah Wakefield." Clara read the note 3 times, surprised by the formality of it and the genuine gratitude expressed in those few words. Most men would have simply paid Mrs. Patterson and thought nothing more of it. But this Zachariah Wakefield had taken the time to write a thank-you note and deliver it personally to her door. She tucked the paper into her pocket and prepared for bed, wondering if she would encounter the mysterious cowboy again, or if he would simply move on as so many did in this transient town. Sleep came slowly that night, and Clara's dreams were filled with shadowy figures and torn fabric that no amount of mending could repair. She woke before dawn feeling restless and decided to take an early morning walk before the town came fully alive. Park City in the pre-dawn hours was almost peaceful, the usual chaos of mining operations and saloon revelry temporarily subdued. Clara walked down Main Street, her shawl pulled tight against the morning chill, breathing in the crisp mountain air. She was passing the livery stable when she heard a voice, low and steady, speaking to a horse. Clara paused, recognizing something in the tone that drew her attention. Through the open stable door, she could see a tall figure brushing down a paint horse, the morning light casting long shadows across the straw-covered floor. The man was speaking softly to the animal, words Clara could not quite make out, but that carried a gentleness she had not expected. "Easy there, girl. I know we have not been giving you the attention you deserve. Things will get better soon." Clara realized she was eavesdropping and turned to leave, but her boot scraped against a loose stone and the sound carried in the quiet morning. The man in the stable turned, and Clara found herself looking directly at Zachariah Wakefield for the first time in full light. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps 28 or 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that seemed to hold a mixture of wariness and curiosity. The shirt he wore was the one she had mended, and she could see her careful stitches across his back as he moved. "Miss Jensen," he said, surprising her by knowing her name. "I did not expect to meet you this early." "I am sorry," Clara replied, feeling foolish. "I did not mean to interrupt. I was just taking a walk." "No interruption," Zachariah said, setting aside the brush he had been using. "I should be thanking you again for the work on my clothes. I have been wearing this shirt for 3 years, and I thought it was beyond saving." "It was not so bad," Clara said, finding her voice. "The tears were clean, easy enough to mend if you know what you are doing." Zachariah studied her for a moment, and Clara felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Mrs. Patterson said you are the best seamstress in Park City." "I can see why." "I am probably the only seamstress in Park City," Clara replied with a small smile. "The competition is not exactly fierce." To her surprise, Zachariah laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious face into something younger and more open. "Fair point. Still, I appreciate the work. These clothes have been through a lot with me." "Harold mentioned you were in a rockslide," Clara said, then immediately wished she had not. It sounded like gossip, which she supposed it was. Zachariah's expression closed slightly, but he nodded. "Something like that. I was up in the canyons looking for a route through to the valley beyond. Got careless and paid for it. My horse saved my life by pulling me clear, but my clothes did not fare as well." "What were you looking for?" Clara asked, then added quickly, "if you do not mind my asking." "Work," Zachariah said simply. "I have been trailing cattle for 8 years, but the ranches down south are consolidating. Fewer hands needed. I heard there might be opportunities up here, maybe working for one of the mine owners who are trying to bring in beef to feed the miners. Figured I would scout the area, see what the land could support." Clara nodded, understanding the need that drove people to keep moving, keep searching for the next opportunity. She had done the same thing herself when she left Missouri. "And did you find what you were looking for?" "Maybe," Zachariah said. "There is good grazing land in some of the valleys if you know where to look. Problem is getting the cattle up here. The trails are rough, and a rockslide like the one I encountered could kill half a herd if you are unlucky." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the horse nickering softly behind Zachariah. Clara knew she should continue her walk, let this man get back to tending his animal, but something kept her rooted in place. There was an ease in Zachariah's presence that she had not expected, a lack of the posturing and aggression she had encountered in so many other men. "I should let you get back to your mourning," Zachariah said finally, echoing her thoughts. "But I wonder if I might ask you something, Miss Jensen." "Clara," she said automatically. "And yes, what is it? Mrs. Patterson mentioned you are looking for more mending work. I have a friend coming into town next week with some of the other cowboys from my old outfit. They are a rough bunch, and their clothes show it. If you are interested, I could send them your way." Clara felt a flush of gratitude. Additional work meant additional money, which meant more security in a town where nothing was certain. "I would appreciate that very much. Thank you." Zachariah nodded, and Clara thought she saw something like relief in his expression, as if he had been worried she might refuse. "Good. I will let them know. They are decent men for the most part. You will not have any trouble from them." Clara said her goodbyes and continued her walk, but her mind remained fixed on the encounter in the stable. There had been something in the way Zachariah spoke to his horse, in the care he showed for his worn clothing, that suggested a man who valued what he had, because he understood how easily it could be lost. She found herself hoping she would see him again before he left Park City, though she told herself it was only professional interest in the additional work he had promised to send her way. The days that followed fell into a familiar rhythm. Clara took on mending jobs from various boarders and townspeople, her reputation growing through Mrs. Patterson's recommendations. She saw Zachariah occasionally, usually in the early mornings when he tended his horse or in the evenings at supper, but they did not speak beyond polite greetings. Clara told herself she was not watching for him, but she could not help noticing when his chair in the corner remained empty, or when his distinctive silhouette appeared on the street below her window. True to his word, Zachariah's friends arrived the following week, a group of 5 cowboys who had ridden up from the ranching country to the south. They were loud and boisterous in the way of men who spent most of their time in the company of cattle and each other, but they treated Clara with respect when Zachariah brought them to her door with bags full of clothes needing repair. She quoted them a fair price, and they agreed immediately, clearly accustomed to paying for services in towns where their skills with rope and horse were worth nothing. "Zach says you are the best," one of them said, a freckled young man named Tommy who could not have been more than 20. "Says you fixed his favorite shirt so well he could not even see where it was torn." "Zach is too kind," Clara replied, though the praise warmed her. "I will do my best with your things." The cowboys departed with promises to return in 3 days, and Clara set to work sorting through the mountain of fabric they had left. Shirts with missing buttons, trousers with torn seams, even a leather vest that needed new lacing. It was more work than she had taken on at once in months, and she felt a spike of anxiety at the thought of completing it all in the promised time. She was still sorting through the pile when a knock came at her door. Clara opened it to find Zachariah standing in the hallway, his hat in his hands and an uncertain expression on his face. "I hope I am not disturbing you," he said. "I wanted to make sure the boys did not overwhelm you with their mending. They can be a bit much when they get excited." "It is fine," Clara assured him. "A lot of work, but I can manage it." Zachariah nodded but did not immediately leave. He seemed to be working up to something, and Clara waited, curious despite herself. "I also wanted to ask if you might join me for supper tomorrow evening," Zachariah said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "Not here at the boarding house, but at the restaurant on Silver Street. I know it is forward of me, but I would like to properly thank you for the work you have done, and I enjoy talking with you." Clara felt her heart skip in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. She had not been courted since leaving Missouri, had not allowed herself to even consider the possibility. Her life in Park City was supposed to be about independence, about making her own way without needing any man. But Zachariah was not like the other men she had known. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that did not demand or take but simply existed, solid and reliable as the mountains themselves. "I would like that," Clara heard herself say, and Zachariah's face lit up with a smile that made him look years younger. "Tomorrow at 6, then," he said. "I will meet you downstairs." After he left, Clara sat on her bed and stared at the pile of mending, her mind whirling. What was she doing? She had come to Park City to escape complications, not to invite new ones. But even as she questioned her decision, she could not quite suppress the flutter of excitement in her chest at the thought of sitting across from Zachariah Wakefield and learning more about the man behind the mended clothes. She threw herself into her work, finishing piece after piece throughout that day and into the night. The rhythm of needle and thread was meditative, allowing her mind to wander even as her hands stayed busy. She thought about Missouri and the life she had left behind, about her father's angry words when she announced she was leaving and her mother's tears as Clara packed her meager belongings. She thought about the journey west, the fear and excitement intertwined as she traveled farther from everything she knew. And she thought about Zachariah, trying to reconcile the formal note he had written with the man who spoke gently to his horse and whose friends clearly respected him. The next day passed in a blur of final preparations. Clara finished the last of the mending work by early afternoon, giving her time to press the garments and prepare herself for the evening. She owned only 2 dresses suitable for going out, both of them practical garments in dark colors that would not show stains easily. She chose the better of the 2, a navy blue dress with a simple white collar, and did what she could with her hair, pinning it up in a style she hoped looked presentable. At 6 o'clock precisely, Clara descended the stairs to find Zachariah waiting in the front parlor. He had cleaned up considerably, his hair neatly combed and his clothes freshly brushed. He wore the shirt she had mended, and Clara felt an odd sense of pride seeing how well her repairs had held up. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, a softening that made her suddenly self-conscious. "You look lovely," he said simply, and Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you," she managed. "You look very nice as well." The restaurant on Silver Street was one of the nicer establishments in Park City, which was not saying much given the general roughness of the town, but it was clean and the food was reportedly good. Zachariah held the door for Clara and guided her to a table near the window where they could watch the evening activity on the street. They ordered food and fell into conversation that flowed more easily than Clara had expected. Zachariah asked about her life before Park City, and Clara found herself telling him about Missouri, about her family, and the reasons she had left. She had not planned to share so much, but something about Zachariah's quiet attention made the words come easily. "My father is not a bad man," Clara said, turning her cup of coffee between her hands. "But he is traditional in his thinking. He believed a woman's place was to marry and keep house, and he could not understand why I wanted something different. When he arranged my engagement to Silas Thornton without asking me, that was the final straw." "What was wrong with this Thornton fellow?" Zachariah asked. Clara looked down at her cup. "Everything. He was 45 years old and looking for a wife young enough to give him sons. He drank too much and had a temper. I knew women who had married men like him, and I knew how those stories ended, so I left." "That took courage," Zachariah said quietly. "Or foolishness," Clara replied. "Some days I am not sure which." "Courage," Zachariah said firmly. "Foolishness would have been staying and hoping things would change. You took control of your own life. That is brave." Clara looked up at him, seeing genuine admiration in his eyes, and felt something shift between them. "What about you?" she asked. "You said you have been trailing cattle for 8 years. Where is home for you?" Zachariah's expression grew distant. "Nowhere, really. Everywhere. I grew up on a ranch in Texas, but my parents died when I was 17. Yellow fever took them both within a week of each other. The ranch got sold to pay debts, and I have been moving ever since, following the herds, working where work was available." "Do you miss it?" Clara asked. "Having a place that is yours?" "Every day," Zachariah admitted, "but I am not sure I would know what to do with it if I had it. I have been on the move so long, I am not sure I remember how to stand still." They talked through supper and into the evening, the conversation ranging from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Zachariah spoke of his hope to someday have his own small ranch. Nothing grand, but enough to support a few cattle and maybe some horses. Clara shared her own ambitions, modest as they were, to build a successful mending business and perhaps someday own a shop of her own where she could sell clothes she made herself. "You could do it," Zachariah said. "You have the skill and the determination." "Maybe," Clara said, "if I can save enough money and find the right location. But those are big ifs in a place like Park City." "Park City will not last forever," Zachariah said. "Mining towns never do. When the silver runs out, most of these people will move on to the next strike. But someone with your skills could thrive anywhere. People always need clothes mended and made." Clara had never thought of it that way, had never considered that her skills might be portable in a way that mining or ranching were not. The idea excited her, opening possibilities she had not previously imagined. When they finally left the restaurant, full dark had fallen over Park City, and the street was lit by the glow of saloon windows and the occasional torch. Zachariah walked Clara back to the boarding house, his presence solid and reassuring beside her in the darkness. At the door to the boarding house, Zachariah paused. "I have had a wonderful evening, Clara. Would you allow me to call on you again?" "I would like that," Clara said, surprised by how much she meant it. Zachariah smiled, and for a moment Clara thought he might try to kiss her, but instead he simply tipped his hat and bid her good night. She watched him walk away into the darkness before heading inside, her mind full of the evening's conversation and the warmth of Zachariah's attention. The following weeks settled into a pattern that felt both thrilling and frighteningly comfortable. Zachariah called on Clara regularly, taking her to supper or on walks through the surrounding hills when the weather permitted. He continued his work scouting grazing land and meeting with mine owners about supplying beef, while Clara built her mending business with a steady stream of customers. The cowboys from Zachariah's old outfit became regular clients, and they spread word of her skills to others passing through town. Clara learned more about Zachariah with each meeting, piecing together a picture of a man who had been shaped by loss but not broken by it. He was thoughtful and measured in his words, but passionate when speaking about things he cared about. He knew an astonishing amount about horses and cattle, could track animals across bare rock, and had a gift for reading weather patterns that seemed almost supernatural. But more than his skills, Clara was drawn to his essential decency, the way he treated everyone from mine owners to stable boys with the same respectful courtesy. Zachariah, for his part, seemed equally captivated by Clara. He asked endless questions about her sewing techniques, genuinely interested in the craft, even though it was far outside his own experience. He praised her business sense and encouraged her ambitions, never suggesting that she should be content with less than she wanted. When Clara mentioned she was saving money for her eventual shop, Zachariah began bringing her additional mending work he found through his own connections, helping her build toward her dream. "I had a thought," Zachariah said one evening as they walked along the edge of town, the setting sun painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "The valley I have been scouting, the one with good grazing land, has a small settlement. Just a few families, but they are trying to establish a proper town. They do not have many services yet, no seamstress that I know of." Clara felt her pulse quicken. "Are you suggesting I should move there?" "I am suggesting we should both move there," Zachariah said, stopping to face her. "Clara, I know we have not known each other long, but I cannot stop thinking about the future and how you fit into it. I have an opportunity to buy some land in that valley, to start the ranch I have always wanted. It would be small at first, but it could grow. And a growing settlement needs someone with your skills." "Zachariah," Clara began, but he continued. "I am not asking you to give up your dreams for mine," he said quickly. I am asking if maybe our dreams could fit together. You could have your shop in the settlement, I could have my ranch nearby. We could build something together. Clara's mind raced. She had been in Park City less than 6 months, had only known Zachariah for a fraction of that time. It was too fast, too sudden, too risky. But even as she thought these things, another part of her recognized the opportunity he was offering. Not just a shop of her own, but a partner who understood her ambitions and supported them. Not just independence, but companionship with someone she had come to care for deeply. "What exactly are you asking me?" Clara said, needing to hear him say it clearly. Zachariah took her hands in his calloused palms warm against her skin. "I am asking if you will marry me, Clara Jensen. I am asking if you will take a chance on building a life together in that valley, supporting each other as we each work toward what we want. I know it is fast, and I know I am asking you to trust me with your future. But I swear I will spend every day proving that trust was not misplaced." Clara looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity and hope. She thought about her life in Park City, about the small room and the endless mending, and the uncertainty of making enough money each month for rent and food. She thought about her dream of a shop, so distant it sometimes seemed impossible. And she thought about Zachariah, about his steady presence and gentle humor, and the way he made her feel seen and valued in a way no one else ever had. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I will marry you." Zachariah's face broke into a brilliant smile, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Clara felt his heart beating against her chest, rapid and strong, and knew her own matched its rhythm. They stood there as the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared overhead. Two people who had found each other in a rough mining town and decided to build something better together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Zachariah finalized the purchase of his land, using savings he had accumulated over years of trail work. Clara sorted through her possessions, deciding what to keep and what to sell, and broke the news to Mrs. Patterson that she would be leaving. The landlady was sad to lose her but happy for her good fortune, and she insisted on hosting a small celebration at the boarding house to mark the occasion. The cowboys from Zachariah's old outfit attended, along with various boarders and townspeople Clara had come to know during her months in Park City. Tommy, the young freckled cowboy, raised a glass in toast. "To Zach and Clara, who are both too good for the rest of us. May your life together be filled with as much happiness as you both deserve." Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the simple sentiment and the genuine affection in the room. She had come to Park City alone and friendless, and now she was leaving with people who cared about her future. She squeezed Zachariah's hand under the table, and he squeezed back, understanding without words what she was feeling. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who passed through Park City once a month. It was a simple ceremony in the boarding house parlor with Mrs. Patterson and Sarah standing as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, the navy blue one she had worn on her first supper with Zachariah, and Zachariah wore a new shirt Clara had made for him, her stitches invisible and perfect. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachariah kissed Clara gently, and she felt a sense of rightness that seemed to resonate in her bones. They spent their wedding night in Zachariah's room at the boarding house, which was slightly larger than Clara's had been but still modest. Clara had been nervous about the intimacy marriage would bring, but Zachariah was patient and gentle, taking his time and ensuring her comfort. When they finally came together, it felt like a natural extension of the emotional connection they had already built, and Clara understood why people spoke of becoming one flesh. She fell asleep in Zachariah's arms, feeling safer and more content than she could remember. The journey to their new home began 2 days later. They packed Clara's sewing machine and supplies, Zachariah's few personal belongings, and provisions for the trip into a wagon Zachariah had purchased for the purpose. The ride through the canyons was beautiful and slightly harrowing, the narrow trails making Clara grateful for Zachariah's skill with the horses. He pointed out landmarks as they traveled, showing her where he had encountered the rockslide and where he had found the best grazing land. The settlement, when they finally reached it, was even smaller than Clara had imagined. Perhaps 15 buildings in total, clustered around a central square that was more mud than grass. But the mountains surrounding the valley were breathtaking, and the river running through the center promised good water. Several families came out to greet them, curious about the newcomers Zachariah had mentioned in his previous visits. "This is my wife Clara," Zachariah said, pride evident in his voice. "She is a skilled seamstress and will be opening a shop here in the settlement." A woman about Clara's age stepped forward, her belly rounded with pregnancy. "Thank goodness. I have been trying to make clothes for this baby and my stitches are terrible. I am Margaret Howard. Welcome to Cedar Valley." Clara warmed to Margaret immediately and allowed herself to be drawn into conversation with the other women, while Zachariah spoke with the men about his plans for his ranch. By the time the sun set on their first day in Cedar Valley, Clara had already received 3 commissions for baby clothes and a promise from the settlement's unofficial leader, a man named Robert Martin, that he would help Zachariah build a small shop building for her business. Their first home was a simple cabin on Zachariah's land, about a mile from the settlement proper. It was small and rough, with gaps in the walls that would need to be chinked before winter and a floor that was nothing but packed earth, but it was theirs. Clara stood in the doorway that first evening, looking out at the land that stretched to the mountains, and felt a sense of possibility that was intoxicating. "What do you think?" Zachariah asked, coming to stand beside her. "I think it is perfect," Clara said honestly. "I think we can make a good life here." "I know we can," Zachariah replied, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Together, we can do anything." The first months in Cedar Valley were hard but rewarding. Zachariah worked from dawn to dusk building up his ranch. Starting with just a dozen head of cattle he purchased from a rancher to the south. He built corrals and a small barn, improved the cabin by adding a proper floor and chinking in the walls, and began cultivating relationships with the mine owners in Park City who might buy his beef. Clara, meanwhile, threw herself into establishing her business. True to his word, Robert Martin organized the men of the settlement to build her a shop building in the town square, a simple structure but solid and weather-tight. Clara filled her shop with fabric she had brought from Park City and supplies she ordered from Denver. She made curtains for Margaret Howard's baby nursery, mended clothes for the ranch hands working nearby, and began taking orders for custom garments from families who were tired of wearing the same worn clothes season after season. Word spread to the surrounding ranches, and soon Clara had more work than she could handle alone. "You need to hire help," Zachariah said one evening over supper. Clara had been working late again, and exhaustion showed in the shadows under her eyes. "I cannot afford to pay anyone yet," Clara protested. "I am still building up capital." "Then teach someone," Zachariah suggested. "There must be a girl in the settlement who would like to learn. You could train her, and in exchange she could help with the simpler work. Eventually, when the business grows, you could pay her properly." Clara considered this and realized he was right. The next day, she approached Margaret Howard, who had a 13-year-old sister-in-law named Lily living with her family. Lily was bright and eager, and she took to sewing with a natural aptitude that reminded Clara of herself at that age. Within weeks, Lily was handling basic mending while Clara focused on the more complex custom work that brought in better money. The seasons turned, and Cedar Valley grew. More families arrived, drawn by the promise of good land and the growing stability of the settlement. A general store opened, then a blacksmith, then a small school where the settlement's children could receive basic education. Zachariah's ranch expanded as he bought more cattle and hired 2 hands to help with the work. Clara's shop became the center of the female social world in Cedar Valley, a place where women gathered to discuss their lives and concerns while Clara worked. A year after their arrival in Cedar Valley, Clara discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning when she woke feeling nauseated, and the pattern continued for several days before she understood what it meant. She told Zachariah that evening, nervous about how he would react to this development they had not specifically planned. Zachariah's response was to pick her up and spin her around, laughing with joy. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, as if he could not quite believe it. "Clara, we are going to be parents." His excitement was contagious, and Clara found her own nervousness giving way to anticipation. She continued working in the shop through her pregnancy, modifying her own dresses as her belly grew and accepting the concerned attention of the settlement's women. Margaret Howard, now the mother of a healthy 6-month-old son, provided advice and reassurance. "It is hard," Margaret said frankly, "but also wonderful. You will do fine." Zachariah was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying about Clara working too hard or lifting too much. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, understanding it came from love and perhaps a touch of fear. They had both lost people they loved, and Clara knew Zachariah was terrified of losing her or the baby. Their son was born on a cold March morning in 1879, arriving after a labor that lasted most of the night. The settlement's midwife, an experienced woman named Hannah Wright, attended the birth along with Margaret Howard. Zachariah paced outside the cabin, and Clara could hear his footsteps even through the walls between contractions. When their son finally made his appearance, red-faced and wailing, Clara felt a rush of emotion so powerful it took her breath away. Hannah cleaned the baby and placed him in Clara's arms, and Clara stared down at the tiny face, seeing features that were a blend of her own and Zachariah's. She called for Zachariah, who entered the cabin with fear and hope warring on his face. "We have a son," Clara said, holding up the baby for him to see. "A healthy, loud son." Zachariah approached as if in a dream, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch the baby's dark hair. "He is perfect," Zachariah whispered. "Clara, you are amazing. Thank you for this gift." They named him Daniel after Zachariah's father, and he became the center of their world. Clara reduced her hours at the shop, training Lily to handle more of the daily work so she could spend time with Daniel. Zachariah doted on his son, holding him in the evenings and singing songs his own father had sung to him. Clara would watch them together, her heart swelling with a contentment she had not known was possible. As Daniel grew from infant to toddler, Cedar Valley continued to thrive. The settlement officially incorporated as a town in 1880, electing Robert Martin as mayor and establishing formal laws and governance. Zachariah's ranch became one of the most successful in the valley, his cattle healthy and his business relationships with the mine owners solid. Clara's shop evolved into something more than just mending and custom orders. She began designing her own patterns and making ready-to-wear garments that sold throughout the valley, and even in Park City, when travelers brought them there. They added onto the cabin, transforming it from a simple dwelling into a proper house with multiple rooms and glass windows. Zachariah built Clara a sewing room with good light where she could work at home when she wanted to be close to Daniel. They acquired chickens and a milk cow, and Clara planted a garden that produced vegetables through the summer months. The life they built was far from easy, but it was theirs, earned through hard work and cooperation. When Daniel was 3 years old, Clara became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect or perhaps because her body had learned the process. Their daughter arrived in the autumn of 1882, a tiny thing with Clara's light hair and Zachariah's serious eyes. They named her Sarah after Mrs. Patterson's daughter, who had been kind to Clara in Park City, and she was as different from Daniel as night from day. Where Daniel had been loud and energetic from birth, Sarah was quiet and observant, watching everything with those solemn eyes. The years flowed by, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and business cycles. Daniel grew into a sturdy boy who loved working with his father, learning to ride and rope almost as soon as he could walk. Sarah showed an aptitude for sewing that delighted Clara, her tiny fingers learning to make stitches with surprising precision. They were a family, bound together by love and shared purpose. In 1885, Cedar Valley experienced its first real crisis when a harsh winter killed livestock throughout the region. Zachariah lost nearly a quarter of his herd, and the financial blow was significant. Clara watched worry etch lines into her husband's face as he calculated losses and tried to determine how to recover. The shop provided steady income that helped them weather the disaster, but Clara knew Zachariah took little comfort in relying on her earnings while his own business struggled. "We are partners," Clara reminded him one evening as they sat by the fire, the children asleep in their beds. "What is mine is yours, and what is yours is mine. We will get through this together, just like we have gotten through everything else." Zachariah pulled her close, and Clara felt the tension in his body slowly release. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured against her hair. "To find you mending my torn clothes in a boarding house in Park City." Clara smiled, remembering that day years ago when she had sat in her small room repairing a stranger's shirt, never imagining how that simple act would change her life. "I think we both got lucky," she said. "You needed someone to mend your clothes, and I needed someone who would see me as more than just a pair of useful hands." They did recover from the hard winter, slowly but steadily. Zachariah rebuilt his herd and diversified, adding horses to his operation after realizing there was strong demand from the growing number of ranchers in the valley. Clara's shop continued to thrive, and she eventually hired 2 more seamstresses in addition to Lily, who had become invaluable over the years. In 1887, the railroad finally reached Cedar Valley, and the town experienced a surge of growth. New businesses opened, including a hotel and a proper restaurant, and the population tripled within 2 years. The changes brought opportunities and challenges. Clara opened a second, larger shop on the town's main street, keeping her original building as a workroom and training center. Zachariah contracted to provide horses for the railroad workers and added significantly to his land holdings. Through all the changes and growth, their marriage remained the foundation on which everything else was built. They still made time for each other, still took walks in the evenings when the children were in bed, still talked through problems and celebrated victories together. Clara sometimes thought about the scared young woman who had fled Missouri, and she could hardly reconcile that person with who she had become. Zachariah had given her the space to grow and the support to pursue her dreams, and she had done the same for him. Daniel was 10 and Sarah was 8 when Clara became pregnant a third time. The pregnancy was unexpected, and Clara worried about her age, now 34, and the risks that came with bearing children later in life. But the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and their second son arrived in the spring of 1889, healthy and strong. They named him Zachary, a variation of his father's name, and he seemed to be a perfect blend of his siblings' personalities, energetic like Daniel but observant like Sarah. The 1890s brought continued prosperity to Cedar Valley and the Wakefield family. Daniel showed interest in ranching and worked alongside his father whenever he was not in school. Sarah spent hours in Clara's shop, her skills with needle and thread surpassing even Clara's at the same age. Young Zachary proved to be the charmer of the family, making friends easily and bringing laughter wherever he went. In 1895, Clara and Zachariah celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary. The town threw a party in their honor, recognizing them as pillars of the community who had been there from the early days. Clara stood beside her husband, looking out at the gathering of friends and neighbors, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built. "Do you ever think about Park City?" Zachariah asked her later that evening as they walked home from the celebration. "About how different things could have been?" "Sometimes," Clara admitted, "but I cannot imagine my life turning out any better than it has. Everything I wanted, everything I dreamed of when I left Missouri, I have found here with you." "I think about it often," Zachariah said. "About walking into that livery stable and seeing you there, about gathering the courage to ask you to supper. What if I had been too afraid? What if you had said no?" "But I did not say no," Clara pointed out. "I said yes, and then I kept saying yes. Yes to marriage, yes to Cedar Valley, yes to building this life together. Those were the best decisions I ever made." Zachariah stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands cupping her face gently. "I love you, Clara Wakefield. I have loved you since the day I saw you mending my clothes with such care, treating a stranger's worn shirt like it mattered. You saw value in something broken and made it whole again. You have been doing that for me ever since, mending the broken parts of me I did not even know needed healing." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. "I love you too. You gave me the freedom to become who I was meant to be, and you did it while becoming the best version of yourself. We have built something remarkable together." They held each other there on the street, not caring if anyone saw, two people who had found each other against all odds and created a life richer than either could have imagined alone. The years continued their steady march. Daniel married a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth in 1898 and began working full-time with Zachariah on the ranch. Sarah married a businessman from Denver in 1900, but insisted on keeping her involvement in Clara's shop, traveling back to Cedar Valley regularly to help with designs and oversee operations. Young Zachary surprised everyone by showing an interest in law and left for Denver in 1902 to apprentice with a firm there. Clara and Zachariah grew older together, their hair graying and their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work, but their love remained constant. They became grandparents in 1899 when Daniel and Elizabeth had a daughter, and again in 1901 when Sarah had twin boys. Watching Zachariah with his grandchildren, Clara saw the same gentleness and patience he had shown with their own children, and she fell in love with him all over again. In 1907, on a warm summer evening, Clara and Zachariah sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains. They were 52 and 58 respectively, and while they both still worked, they had begun to step back and let the younger generation take over more of the daily operations. "You remember the first time we sat together and watched the sunset?" Zachariah asked. "That night I asked you to marry me. "Of course I remember," Clara said. "I was terrified and excited and so hopeful it made my chest ache." "I was terrified too," Zachariah admitted. "I thought you would say no, that you would think I was crazy for suggesting we build a life together when we had known each other such a short time." "It was crazy," Clara agreed, "but it was also the sanest thing either of us ever did. We recognized something in each other, something fundamental and true. We took a leap of faith, and we landed exactly where we were supposed to be." Zachariah reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing the wedding band she had worn for 30 years. "If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of uncertainty was worth it to end up here with you. Even the rock slide that tore your favorite shirt," Clara teased gently. Zachariah laughed. "Especially the rock slide. Because without it, you might never have mended my clothes, and I might never have found the courage to thank you in person. That torn shirt brought us together, Clara. I will be grateful for it until the day I die." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished its descent, and stars began to appear. Clara thought about the long journey from that boarding house in Park City to this porch in Cedar Valley, about all the choices and chances that had led her here. She thought about the young woman who had mended a stranger's clothes, not knowing she was mending the gateway to her future. "Tell me about the future," Clara said, breaking the silence. "What do you see for us in the years ahead?" Zachariah considered the question. "I see us growing old together, watching our grandchildren grow and maybe welcoming more. I see the ranch continuing to thrive under Daniel's management, and your shop expanding even more under Sarah's direction. I see us taking the time to enjoy what we have built, to travel a bit if you want, to simply be together without always working toward the next goal." "That sounds perfect," Clara said, "though I hope we have many more years before we are too old to work." "Many more years," Zachariah agreed. "But however many we have, I want to spend them all with you." The years that followed fulfilled Zachariah's vision. They did grow older, but they grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They traveled to Denver to visit Zachary, who had become a successful lawyer, and to San Francisco, where Sarah and her husband had relocated for his business. They spent time with Daniel and Elizabeth on the ranch, teaching their grandchildren the skills they had learned over a lifetime. Clara's shop became the largest garment business in the valley, employing over a dozen women and shipping clothes as far as Salt Lake City. Zachariah's ranch was recognized as producing some of the finest horses in Utah, and ranchers came from throughout the territory to buy breeding stock. But their greatest success was not measured in business accomplishments. It was measured in the family they had raised, the community they had helped build, and the enduring love they had nurtured through decades of life together. In 1912, Cedar Valley celebrated its 35th anniversary as an incorporated town, and Clara and Zachariah were honored as founding members of the community. Now, in their late 50s and mid-60s, they stood before the town they had helped build and reflected on how far they had all come. 35 years ago, this was nothing but a few buildings and a lot of hope, Zachariah said in his speech. Today, it is a thriving town with schools and businesses and families building their futures here. My wife and I are grateful to have been part of this community's growth, and we are excited to see what the next 35 years will bring. Clara added her own thoughts. When I first came to this valley, I was looking for a place to build a business and make a life for myself. What I found was so much more. I found a community that supported my dreams, friends who became family, and a partnership with my husband that has been the foundation of everything good in my life. Thank you all for being part of our journey. The celebration that followed was joyous, with music and dancing and enough food to feed everyone twice over. Clara danced with Zachariah under the stars, moving slower than they had when they were young but with no less joy. Their children and grandchildren joined them, and Clara felt a sense of completion, of having lived a full and meaningful life. The years moved forward as they always do. Clara and Zachariah eventually retired from active management of their businesses, content to advise their children, but no longer carry the weight of daily operations. They spent their days together, tending their garden, receiving visits from their growing family, and enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. In 1920, on a spring morning much like the one when they had first arrived in Cedar Valley, Zachariah fell ill. What started as a simple cold worsened into pneumonia, and despite the care of doctors and the prayers of family, he did not recover. He died peacefully in their bed with Clara holding his hand, his last words an expression of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. Clara grieved deeply, feeling the loss of her partner like a physical wound. But even in her grief, she found comfort in the legacy they had built together. Their children were successful and happy, carrying forward the values Clara and Zachariah had instilled. Their grandchildren were growing into fine young people, some already showing interest in continuing the family businesses. The town they had helped establish was thriving, a testament to the vision and hard work of its founding families. Clara lived for 12 more years after Zachariah's death, remaining active in the community and continuing to advise Sarah in running the shop. She took comfort in her family, in her work, and in her memories of the man who had changed her life by asking her to dinner all those years ago. She told stories to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the early days in Cedar Valley, about building a life from nothing, about the importance of hard work and love and partnership. When Clara died in 1932 at the age of 77, the entire town of Cedar Valley mourned. She was buried beside Zachariah on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the mountains that had witnessed their love story. Her obituary spoke of her business accomplishments and community contributions, but it also noted that she had been married to Zachariah Wakefield for 45 years, and that their marriage had been regarded as a model of partnership and devotion. The shop continued under Sarah's ownership, eventually being passed down to one of Clara's granddaughters. The ranch remained in the Wakefield family for generations, each new owner honoring the legacy Zachariah had established. And in Cedar Valley, the story of Clara and Zachariah became something of a legend, told to young couples as an example of how love and hard work could build something lasting. The torn shirt Clara had mended that day in Park City had long since worn out and been discarded, but the connection it had sparked had created a legacy that lasted far beyond fabric and thread. Two people who might have remained strangers had instead become partners, lovers, parents, and grandparents. They had built businesses, raised a family, and helped establish a community. But most importantly, they had loved each other faithfully through all the joys and hardships life had brought. In the end, the story of Clara and Zachariah was a story about taking chances, about seeing possibility in broken things, and about having the courage to build a life with someone even when the future is uncertain. It was a story about how a simple act of kindness, mending a stranger's torn clothes, could open the door to a love that would last a lifetime and echo through generations. The mountains still stood watch over Cedar Valley, silent witnesses to all the lives that had been lived in that place. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, you might almost hear the echo of Clara's laughter mingling with Zachariah's deep voice, their love a permanent part of the valley they had made their home. The buildings they had constructed might eventually crumble, and the businesses they had established might transform or close, but the love they had shared remained, woven into the very fabric of the community they had helped create. Their great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories of the woman who had mended a stranger's clothes and the cowboy who had realized they were his, of how that simple connection had sparked a romance that became the foundation of a family dynasty. The story reminded them that the most profound changes in life often come from small moments, from choices to be kind, to take chances, to see value in things others might discard. And so the legacy continued, carried forward not just in bloodlines and businesses, but in the enduring example of a love built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and the daily choice to support and cherish one another. Clara and Zachariah had shown everyone around them what partnership truly meant, and that lesson rippled outward through time, touching lives they would never know but shaping the future nonetheless. In Cedar Valley, where it all began, their story remained alive, told and retold, adapted and embellished, but always returning to the essential truth at its core that sometimes the most important moments in life come when we least expect them, when we are simply doing what needs to be done, like mending a stranger's torn clothes on an ordinary afternoon in a boarding house room. That was where it had started, with needle and thread and kindness, and from that beginning had grown something beautiful and lasting. A love story for the ages set against the backdrop of the Wild West, when the territory was still being tamed, and futures were still being written by those brave enough to take hold of them.